we're going to let this group go, and we're just going to start out generally talking about what is the controversy when it comes to local foods. Take it away.
Okay. So we were just sitting here discussing like controversies as a whole. So we came up with a few questions. What are some reasons that you think that people choose to shop local? Like, are there any benefits to it?
We talked about this too, and like, I guess maybe for me, just like, sometimes it's just fresher, it tastes better, and also sometimes you might know the person that you're buying it from. Those are some of our reasons.
Does anyone else have different reasons?
Does anyone buy local in here? No, you definitely do.
I was saying to our group, but I never like go to the local like produce center and at home and be like, wow, I'm coming here because I really want to stimulate the income cost. That's not usually my goal.
Back home, I would 100% go to produce stands. Like, that's a big thing in Florida. You can't get better, like, tomatoes or watermelon, or there's just something about it coming, like, straight from the field. So for me, it was definitely a taste thing. And it was cheaper.
And you can like buy one thing. Like, yeah, you can buy like one cucumber here, but like at a produce stand, like I felt like I could buy one and not feel judged. Like one of each, you know, like an apple, sometimes you have to buy like the bag, and I'm like, no, I don't want to buy a bag, I just want one apple. And I can do that in a smaller stand setting.
You can do it at Walmart.
Yeah, I just don't like Walmart produce.
That's fair.
I know that sounds bad, but I don't like, I've never had good produce there.
I have that struggle with Aldi produce. Like, even though it's cheap, most things are already pre-bagged. And I'm like, I don't need 5 pounds of potatoes today.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to eat that
We
much.
watch their workers slaying around. Like, they're working real hard, but they're like throwing apples.
I went to go buy some grapes the other day, and all of them had mold. That was so gross.
Have you guys seen the TikTok of like Walmart where the guy was like, these raspberries all used to have mold in them, and they've gotten told to like pick out the ones with mold. And now I can't do Walmart produce. After that one, I'm out.
That's rough. Yeah.
So where do we get some of the ideas about local food being better? Like, is there any statistics or anything?
My mouth said so.
But I'm wondering if it's like the placebo effect. We're just assuming, like, you're telling yourself, oh, it tastes better because it's grown local. So we're like, in our brains it's already that predetermined, and then we're like, yeah, it tastes better, but does it actually taste better?
Right. Could we do a blindfold test?
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think
Oh my gosh, that's what we're going to do next week. Okay, got it. Sorry.
I think, like, in my area, I always know the people who produce it, and so it's like, oh, I love you, so I'm gonna love your produce, and I wanna, like, give you money because then you can buy your kids Christmas presents.
Yeah.
Like, that's my thought process always. So, yeah.
So, in the article, it like mentions that, like the farm to university topic, and it said the proposal, so like farms, like fresh local produce, was proposed. The proposal was selected because it was assumed to benefit like the local economy, and I think that's where a lot of people think buying local is. The local economy and environment, not because it was shown. So like, I kind of think like what you said, the placebo effect plays a big role. Like, we just think it's better. Like, we just assume and go with it.
Our next question kind of goes right off of that one. So why do we assume these foods are better when there are no regulations on them that we know of?
I like buying from Grana. That's not my Grana down the street, because small town, like that's like my thing. That's like my family. I think it's just like a small town thing maybe. I don't know. I can't speak for someone in Los Angeles going downtown to buy produce.
Yeah. I do think there's like this push, the chapter talks about it a little bit, about like maintaining tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, again, y'all know I buy Florida's natural orange juice. Do I necessarily think, I think it tastes better. I think it might be the placebo effect. But part of it's like, I feel like I'm doing whatever I can to keep citrus growing in my area. Like, and rather than kind of accepting that change might happen, I'm like, whatever I can do to keep the orange groves there, right? Like, I want to maintain that tradition of what my county and my city is known for. So, I feel like that's part of it.
Also, like, just knowing that your produce hasn't been on a truck for the last 3 days and then just pulled off and put on the shelf. Like, it might have been grown in the pasture behind the farmer's market. You know.
Yeah, because there is some stuff that they harvest early to try to get ahead of transportation time that I think does affect the taste.
It's not like fully ripe yet.
And the cost.
However,
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, you go to the grocery store to get an avocado and it's still hard as a rock. You're like, you picked this thing way too early.
And then you forget about it. Very much.
Every time. Every time.
I think my biggest question is, so I thought the milk thing was kind of crazy. Like, they're just taking all this raw whole milk and stirring the pot and dishing it out or whatever they're doing. And to me, that sounds like disease. Like, I was grossed out reading that. But that seems super irrational to us because that's not our culture. So I was just wondering if there's anything that like y'all's family does that if you were to tell someone, they'd be like, what?
I don't think it's a problem.
My town is kind of a dairy town. And so one of my good friends lives on a dairy, and their family takes their raw milk. Like, that's what they're super used to because their dairy is a family farm, so that's what their parents grew up on, their parents' parents grew up on, everything. And I think, like, I've had it, it does taste good, like raw whole milk, but it's another tradition thing, I think, especially, you know, for them, they don't even like milk from the store.
I had some in Costa Rica, and when they first told me, I was like, this ain't it. Also, they gave me coffee that day, so there was just a lot going on that I'd never had before. And I really liked it because in my mind it tastes like ice cream, and like because it's sweeter than anything. So it's like if they need something out of this calf, something out of this calf, they can put it together and make the best quality according to them.
My mom was raised on a dairy farm, and I think that's where we have like a butcher place that has like local meats, but also like we have a local dairy and they'll supply like the local dairy there, and that's where she will only get her milk. Like it still comes in a glass like little bottles, and you have to in front of like do all that. That's the only milk that she will drink. Other than that, I mean, she'll drink nut milk, but nut juice, whatever you want to call it. But she is a very like regular, like fresh.
We used to have in my hometown a meat market, Evans Meat Market, that they butchered all the animals that they sold, smoked them themselves, like, and that would be the only place my Nana would buy meat, because to her it was like the closest thing to being back home and then doing it themselves on the farm. And I remember when they went out of business, she was so upset that she was going to have to start buying her meat from a retail store. And it was more of just like the nostalgia behind what that meat market represented.
We have one like that, it's called Tillage. You could buy steak and worms to go fishing, all at the same counter.
Yes.
And the best.
Well, that's what this meat market was like. You had the beef aisle, pork aisle, chicken aisle, and then they would have fish, because again, Florida.
Yeah.
Imagine all of that together in one smell. It was glorious.
I just remember walking in, we had one growing up, it's called Steve's Meat Market, and I just remember my mom taking us in there, and I'd look at all the frog legs and everything.
Yeah.
And a big buffalo head, like in the store. And just like walking in, I used to think it smelled bad, but now I'm like, childhood.
Yeah. My Nana, like, you could get a lot of like the specialty products there too, you know, like giblets and ham hocks and stuff like that. And especially at like holiday time with the stuff my family would cook when they closed, she made Like, she complained enough at the local Publix that they would start carrying giblets during Thanksgiving. She's like, we cook giblet gravy. How am I gonna cook my giblet gravy if no one around here sells giblets? It's great. That's good stuff.
I love
Gizzards. I know.
They're ruthless.
Don't mess with her. Any other questions y'all have? No? So kind of talking about the just overall controversy and kind of where some of these ideas come from about local food. Now take us to some of the bigger issues.
So our two topics were, are local foods healthier and do local foods have a smaller carbon footprint? And our first question is, do you think people just assume the carbon footprint is smaller because they assume they are buying local when in reality they don't quite understand the grasp of like the 400 miles is still considered local?
Yeah.
If that makes sense, sorry.
When you say it one more time, let me like,
So basically the gist is, do you think people assume like the carbon footprint is smaller because like they're buying it in like their downtown when in reality like it's coming from 400 miles away? And like if so, like how can we help that, like the carbon footprint, which as a whole is a topic. But
I think people just don't assume, or they don't take into account what the word local means.
Mhm.
Like local sounds good, like we have our local livestock show, that's just our school, but nobody really, I don't think, before reading this chapter, I wouldn't have thought that local would have been that far away. And so it's just a misleading word.
because I think Walmart now knowing now that it's 400 like miles, I think Walmart uses that. You know what I'm saying? They're like, hey, we have local produce, full local produce, yeah, it's 400 miles. Like, are we really supporting, you know, like, I don't know.
But that
Where is
was-
it local from? Is it local from Bentonville, Arkansas, or?
that goes back to being like an advertisement scheme.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yep.
So kind of going off like the 400 miles, besides just transportation being an issue, what are some other ways we could have like a smaller carbon footprint when dealing with local foods?
I feel like a lot of time it's smaller operations, so they're not really watching closely what runoff they have going on, like no one's regulating them on anything. So I feel like maybe, I don't want the government in it, but like, maybe have some expectations for it. And I was also thinking when you were like, it's a marketing scheme, who do we think helped come up with the 400-mile definition of local?
And I also think it also complain off yours, like, they use older equipment. Like, if you think about it, they can't afford these newer equipment, so like, maybe the runoff from like the gas tank leaky, like stuff like that, they just can't afford it because they are smaller, so they're not getting what they need. So I think it also goes back to that.
That's like, because that's what like the article says, is that people assume that it's a smaller carbon footprint because it is local, when in reality, like a larger cooperation who's doing it has a smaller one because they're able to have like nicer equipment that, I'm stupid today.
More efficient.
Yeah, thank you. Our last question is, do you think buying local foods as opposed to like frozen fruits and vegetables is more cost effective? If not, like how can we help this issue?
I had something for the last one. I wanted to, is that okay? Back to the previous question?
Yeah.
I thought it was super interesting how it said like, a good way to reduce the carbon footprint is to produce those things in their most efficient, locations. But I know that's not a good way. You can't get, bananas from.
Yeah, well, that's what, because I remember reading that article and like thinking like how good it would be, but then it was like somewhere in North Dakota would never have a pineapple.
Well, and so that's like one of those economic principles of comparative advantage, that if you're just thinking in economic terms and looking at it, comparative advantage seems like that is the way to go. That like whatever you are most efficient at growing, producing, whatever, that's what you do. And you specialize in it. And you allow other regions to specialize in their things. And so inside of a country that seems okay. But when we start looking at international trade, what are some issues that can arise if we solely function on this comparative advantage, specialize in what you're good at thing? Then maybe we are only relying on bananas for Costa Rica. We're only relying on this particular food product from another area of the world, because what happens locally is going to translate into things that happen globally, right? Like we can't, we're in a globalized society. That's what we're in, right? And so there is some hesitation between that, like, again, economically it sounds good, but maybe socially that's not going to be the best thing to go on, because we could get taken advantage of really easily. That's why we have trade wars, right? We don't want to have to rely on our food supply from just other people.
I have a question for you. How large would an operation have to be to like be sufficient at working, like doing a farmer's market? Because you talked about like the equipment, but maybe this is because I'm small-minded when it comes to this or not educated enough, but like I only think of like little gardens, like fruits, like tomatoes, vegetables, because that's what I know.
Yeah. I think it just depends on what they want to do. I think I would maybe compare it to like food trucks, right? So this idea that people who run food trucks, one of the benefits to a food truck is that you get to determine every day how much you want to sell, right? And like once you sell out, you sell out. So some would say, well, why aren't you trying to sell more? And a lot of people that own food trucks say, well, this is what keeps me happy. Like maybe I don't need more. Like that would mean more work. That would mean more whatever. And so I think that's kind of how people that solely use that way to sell their products, that's kind of how they function on their farms as well. Is like you've got to kind of look at that cost benefit ratio of increasing the amount you produce, and is that really going to pay off in more profits, or is it going to result in just more work? And you know, so like my friends back home that they mainly sell, like I said, to local markets and then to high-end restaurants, they increase their profits. Like they probably only have about a 35-acre farm, but they increase their profits by choosing the different varieties that they grow so that they can charge more for them. So they have specialty products. They only go to a certain area, so they've really built like a big consumer base. So they're not having to travel all over the state to all the markets. And they're like, this is sufficient for our family. We don't need to have 30 more acres or whatever. So I think, does that help? Kind of?
I was curious.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Like instead of having too much to sell, like keeping the demand high is part of that too.
Yeah.
There's a barbecue place in Wilson that we'll try to go to, but sometimes you get there at lunchtime and they're sold out. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, we'll come back next time, or we'll have to get here early next time, keeps his demand high.
Right. Higher the demand,
Yeah.
higher price you can charge.
We have a
Right.
place like that, and they don't like serve anyone, which I'm pretty positive, like they're regular, you just keep them open, because that's what makes them happy, it's just a bunch of old men talking. And like, if you come in there before school, like, and there's like one of their regulars behind you, they will like seat him first and like serve him before you get your donut.
That's awesome. Did y'all have any more questions? You know, I thought it was interesting in the book on that idea of carbon footprint. It points out that 80% of the carbon emissions of food occur at the farm. Only 10% are emitted in transportation. I just think that's a good number for y'all to kind of know, again, as you have these intellectual conversations with folks of like, I think in general we should be worried about carbon footprint, but it's like when people say that's their only reason is that, well, I just don't want it to be shipped so far. You should be like, are you as concerned about the production practices? You know, and maybe they haven't even thought about that as part of the carbon emission process. You know, I just, because I know when I read that, I was like,
It
ooh.
talks a lot about how they're, like, on large scale places like that, it's less of a carbon footprint per pound of food.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They're not sending like half full trucks.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, last group. Wrap us up. The whole economy controversy.
So ours was focused on like, do you guys think that fine, local actually stimulates the local economy. And so, the first question I think we had is, do you think it's important for people to shop locally sometimes? Like, not 100%, but just like in general, sometimes.
I think it's important, like if I were to sell something, or if I were a producer or something, I want to know that the people around me are supportive. Like just seeing the same people, like you're saying with that restaurant, their regulars keep them open. Just having that personal interaction instead of just shipping it really far away. So I think it's important to be able to be open and relatable with people.
Ooh. On that note, I want to read this to y'all. This is another one of my food politic books. And I was waiting for the right time. Let me find it in here. Oh, shoot. Keep going. I'll come back to it. I thought I had saved the page, but I marked the wrong page. It wins the conversation.
I think you took that paper out earlier.
Is there a difference between,
You can wait. I wanted to see if anyone else had an answer. Like, does anybody else have anything to say about the first one?
I think it's important to do it occasionally, but like kind of what we were saying, like it's more cost effective to like go and buy the bag of frozen fruit because like you can save it. What you're paying at like the grocery store opposed to like what you're paying there is you're gonna have more, at least in my mind, I assume you will, as well as like it talks about how like, and this kind of goes back to like our section, that people that are going to farmers market, it's like not a one-stop shop, so they're having to go to the grocery store, which is like gas, which is missions, and so I think it's important like occasionally, like regularly, if you do that for like certain things, like in certain seasons, but it's just like 2 cents as a child.
So kind of tying into that and tying into what you said, this idea of just kind of the social aspect of it, and it goes back, this might be true for everyone except for Savannah, who doesn't want to talk to people when she grocery shops. It
Sorry.
says,
It's therapeutic.
says apart from cost, nutrition, safety, or convenience, direct food sales from farmers to local consumers do bring important social benefits. Some consumers purchase food from farmers markets simply to add a satisfying social dimension to their weekly food routine. Sociologists calculate that shoppers will have on average 10 times as many conversations at a farmer's market compared to a supermarket. In many cities and towns, farmers markets have taken on, and not for the first time, the function of a lively new public square.
and I think that's why I like them, especially like during COVID, like you're so like alone.
Uh-huh.
And then like I get out every Saturday morning and like you get to socialize, you know?
The morning part's hard for
Yeah.
I think one reason I like it, I know in Burlington, we have this little family, and one of the daughters wanted to buy some dairy goats, seemed fun, and they're like, you know what, if this sparks interest, because she had terrible social anxiety. Like, if anybody was like, hi, how's it going, like, she would run away, and she would cry in the corner. Like, they did not know how to deal with her, and she was like, I just want dairy goats, and they're like, okay, and then she started a business with it, and now it's the biggest small local business in like our area, and she's given speeches about it. She's made thousands of dollars off of it, and I think in those aspects, like, these people are really trying to get the social aspect of it, and I've noticed at a lot of our local farmers markets, it's the people who are very, very introverted, and they're willing to talk to you, and I feel like that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
So, next question.
Is there a difference between stimulating and supporting the local economy?
Ooh, good question.
I definitely think yes. I mean, we saw it this summer with the stimulus check. For a lot of people, that went quick. So if you're just choosing to stimulate your local producers every few months, and everyone's doing that, then it's really good, and then it's really not. And it's like, did you really help anything, or are you just trying to feel good about yourself?
Yeah, well, and like my thing with like supporting is like you can give somebody like $30 for your produce and that's gonna help them like buy new basketball shoes for their 7th grader. So like that's like supporting it, but it's not necessarily like stimulating it.
Anyone else? Do you want to do your scenario?
Yeah. So I was just talking about how, like, in the same as like stimulating the economy and supporting it, say there's a new Walmart in town, and then there's a local, like, farmer that has watermelons. Walmart has watermelons for $5 a piece. The farmer has like bigger, like better watermelons for $6 a piece, but it's easier and closer to go get that at Walmart. So like, what is most of the time gonna happen?
What is the what gonna happen?
What's gonna happen most of the time?
Most of the time, people will go to Walmart. But I feel like you can also take this back to say watermelons are like pumpkin patches. Like if people are like, oh, that's fun, like let's go get pictures with all these watermelons. And like
Watermelon crawl.
Exactly. And then, like one of my best friends is a huge watermelon producer in Texas, and I can tell that their watermelons are 10 times better than anything that Walmart usually has. And so when you know that, I feel like you're more willing to go and pay that $6 and drive further. But I feel like a lot of people are just like, we just want this watermelon for a tiny bit of time and don't really care about the taste. They just care that they have it.
Do you think that plays a role in like people not knowing? So like in my small town, like I know the guy that like sits on the corner in his truck bed with his watermelons and his grandson. But like people passing through going to Walmart don't realize like, one, how good the watermelons would be, or like two, like it is kind of scary to like stop on the side of the road and buy produce.
My mom knows it.
What did you say?
I did it in high school. I bought watermelon from an old man, and I opened my trunk, and my mom was like, "Where did you get those?" And I was like, "There's this guy," and she was like, "What?" So yeah, it's a little sketchy. He was super nice though, but I didn't know that going in.
See, the big thing back home are like bold peanut stands. Like, people will just be on the side of the street with a bold peanut stand, and people are like, you stopped? And I'm like, those are the best.
I think they're delicious, but you're like, "Whoa, what are you gonna do?"
I mean, I might die from E. coli, but.
Sketchiest situations.
Y'all ever been to
Short
shortcakes?
I love shortcakes.
It's so good, but it's so sketchy.
Well,
Drive down 177 in the summertime and just look at all the watermelons and all the fruit that comes through like Stratford,
Yeah.
Davis area. Like that's the best, like cantaloupe and honeydew watermelons and all that stuff.
But I think it's also where you're raised. Like if people aren't raised where like there's a lot of like side stands, like stuff like that, they're not gonna stop. But like us, we know it's gonna be okay. Like yeah, they're sketchy, but you know what? That food.
I think I can
out.
outrun him.
well, I think Bailey hit on a good point though too of like, we'll pay more if we're gonna get more out of it, right? So it might not be more food, it might be an experience. So we're starting to kind of get into this idea of like, well, if you're gonna be local and commit to it, maybe you've gotta be part of agritourism. Why might some operations be on board with that and why might some operations not?
More money.
So there's a potential for more money. You can charge a little bit more, but then like what are some of the, why might people be hesitant to have agritourism operations?
Well, it's
Huh?
like a liability, like they could come out and ruin their produce, you know?
Unless the state has laws in place for agritourism, all the liability falls back on, like there's no, if someone gets hurt on their farm, farmer's liable.
Yeah.
If their crops get damaged, insurance won't cover it,
I
like,
think of like agri-terrorism.
Yeah.
Like, people just, someone not understanding agriculture or not like seeing its importance, just like taking an opportunity, which is like, that's like a rare occasion, but like I'm worst case scenario type of person. And like, that would make me very hesitant because like you can't have really like a whole lot of control on who's coming in and who's going out into the field.
It's also a lot more work.
Yeah.
Whenever you bring new people in.
you've usually gotta hire some folks, cause you're not gonna wanna be there all the time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of upfront costs to like add those things to make it fun.
Or like, so have y'all seen like the tulip farm in Texas, like Texas tulips? And so like, it's like beautiful, and first of all, the pictures, lies. It's like 30 minutes from my house, and so like you can go like in the peak for like 3 days and it's really pretty, but like people that are just there to like take pictures and like for the experience do not give a darn that they're crushing these tulips walking over to the pink flowers because they're done with the purple flowers.
Oh, wow.
So, like, just,
I didn't go to Texas Tulips, but I went to the wildflower farm in Tulsa, which was amazing. But what they do, like, an older lady owns the place and has a house, like, right there, and she sits out on her back porch and makes sure, like, how much you're taking and if you're stepping over it. And she's like, my husband decided to do this. Like, I talked to her for a while about it. She's like, I just want to make sure no one's stepping on our flowers, because like they've done this for years, but they just started the agritourism part of it all. And I was like, if more people did that, I think it would be less of a liability. Like, have an old lady stare at you the whole time and you're like,
Yeah.
don't do this. Because I was like, did I take too many flowers? Like, everything. She's like, no, that's a good amount. I'm like, thank you. And I think if more people like were held liable and accountable.
Yeah.
I have one more question, and I'm kind of just curious, like, I'd like for everyone to answer it. So, if you do, or if you were to shop locally, what would be your personal reason for purchasing local foods? I'm just curious, like I said, I don't buy locally to be like, I really want to stimulate the economy today.
I guess that's my mentality. I don't know if I mean, I'd like to support businesses, but I'm more about like get out convenience, so I'd probably still choose Walmart, depending if I found something I really liked, but I'd probably shop at Walmart, so.
well, so in Van Alstyne, we have like this, it's called like the donut shop, and they're the people that do not serve you unless you're there 7 days a week. And like we go there because like one, it's really good, and like two, it's kind of like the experience. If you sit in this little cramped booth, kind of like shortcakes. But like this isn't food, but like we have a greenery, and all of his decorations are like they're very like cute, and like my mom and I like love them. And like we go because like we love Corey. Like we don't want to pay like $80 for this sign in our yard that we could get at Hobby Lobby for 20, but like we're going to because of like we know him and like want to support him, I guess. So mine would be like personal connection.
I think definitely the people aspect, because like a few weeks ago when we talked about like, have you ever bought bread from a bakery and everything, my grandparents paid for like they didn't have money for Christmas presents for their kids or grandkids, and they were kind of mad about it, and so they started like a bakery business during Christmas so they would be able to buy Christmas presents for all of us. And I know a lot of people who do that still. And I think it's like, I was that kid. I'm like, I was able to get Christmas presents from my grandparents because of this. So I'm like, I want to give back to those people so their kids can have an education, they can get Christmas, they can get birthday presents. And so I think I like stepping into like my shoes and their shoes as well. So I think I'm more that aspect than anything.
I'm definitely more likely to buy local when like that area is like known for a product. Like some places are really known
That's a
for their
good point.
barbecue, some places are really known for their seafood. Like definitely, like if it's like a local known thing to have.
Do not buy fresh seafood from Oklahoma. I haven't been there yet.
Me either. I really want to go to the experience. A little razzle dazzle.
I went and I was gonna get to seafood, but then just was not.
Is it good? They opened one like in Sepulpa, so when I go home.
There's one in
somewhere,
Guthrie.
I was like, is it worth it to go, or?
It's like,
I mean, it was kind of sketchy when I went, but I think it's the building in general. The building's a little sketchy.
doesn't it have a drive-through?
Yeah.
What are you talking tractor?
Sam's Southern Eatery on,
Six.
Yeah.
it looks like a barn.
I mean, if you fry it, it's good, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, because I live right there. It's a little
And like, I like
sketchy.
sketchy.
Yeah,
I
but
really
I
do,
don't-
but this is like
It's actually seafood places,
I was
just a
like-
different thing.
I will tell you it's a lot of frozen. I do know that because I used to work at Bayou, and so that was like our competitor, and we found out a lot of their stuff.
Is Bayou the one on downtown?
Yeah, but we were down for that.
That was very disappointing.
Trust me.
It was so
Shrimp
good.
and grits every flipping Sunday. Oh,
So
with the
good.
Flipping Benedict. Oh, man.
They know the best business now.
And they're flipping, not the cobblers, but what would they call them?
Bread pudding.
Bread pudding? Yes. I used to eat that stuff like by the little
I was just
trays.
really shocked that they closed because it seemed like during COVID, people were doing a lot of takeout from them.
It
Like,
was the rent of that place that.
I've heard that a lot about downtown stuff.
And like the guy, so the place next to the glass, he wants like 14,000 a month. Yeah, so the place that they had was like really, really expensive. And like whenever we first started the to-go order thing, like we were doing good. But it was the fact that we like opened up again and nobody was coming in and it was just too much. And we were like, we don't want to go in like true debt,
Right.
like trying to save it. So we're gonna like call it good now. Like we're not ahead, but like
Yeah.
we're not above either. So
We need restaurants like that back in Stillwater.
I know. I do think I'm getting a bread pudding though for Christmas. I already talked to them. I was like, I stay here for Christmas. I expect that.
So there's a place that's kind of sketchy that, I don't know what
Let's do a field trip.
Asian. It's called Boba Cafe over in front of the 6th Street Walmart, or
Boba
the
Fusion.
Perkins Walmart.
I've been wondering about that place.
It's
Yeah.
really good.
Is it really?
And it's all homemade.
The new taco place is that Drew's liquor store?
Yes.
That's, oh my gosh. They're
I
New
saw it the
taco
other day. I
place.
have
They're
it.
terrific
Over-
tacos.
What is it called?
The old Pizza Hut place? Is that the one y'all are talking about? Or what new taco place?
Is that over there by Lakeview?
It's by, what
Yes, there's
apartments
like-
are those? The orange apartments.
Okay, so the
Progress.
Aki's over here, and then it's like 2
Right.
blocks this way,
Yeah.
and it's that
By
liquor
Domino's.
store that
Yeah,
attached
it's
to.
like-
Yeah, it was an old Pizza Hut building.
Yes.
Old-
I haven't seen that.
I
Yeah.
saw it the other day. I
Those
thought
I've been told
tacos,
mixed reviews on it.
Their queso is like, it's yellow queso, but let me tell you what, grandma makes good yellow queso. Like, grandma's in there whipping those boys up.
It's like Thai food. There's a lot of,
Thai food?
it's a really good sushi place.
My stomach is sensitive.
I'll plug Cafe Mona if you haven't been to it.
Yeah.
That's by 6th Street or Perkins Walmart.
It's really close to Boba Fusion.
Okay, so I was.
Cafe Mona, and they do like espresso drinks. They have a great breakfast menu, but their espresso drinks are legit.
I was very confused. I went there Sunday after church, and I got it was like just rice and chicken and queso and stuff, and I had vegetables in it, but it looked like they took a can of like mixed vegetables and put like I had green beans and peas and
Oh,
carrots in it.
really?
It was very interesting.
Huh. So, I mean, I think local restaurants go in with local foods. I think our conversation's on topic.
I agree.
You know, I think, Stephanie, back to your question though about like why do you choose, like for me, I think part of it is tradition, maintaining a sense of tradition. But honestly, I think what makes me decide whether to do or not is how much money I have. My shopping habits are very different when I have a real paycheck versus the past 4 years of my life as a grad student. I mean, honestly, like, I don't think twice now about the $6 watermelon versus, I mean, whereas last year I was like, I budgeting everything out. And I think that kind of relates to, Ethan came in early before some of y'all were here, and he voiced some concern about the reading. Then I think that kind of ties into his concern. What was your concern, Ethan?
Just how, like, the book has a lot of biased opinions on, like, a lot of these topics. Now it's like pushing, saying that local food isn't like all that it really, like all that we think it is, and it's kind of like, I don't really like reading it just because of that. It's trying to find any problems with it.
I liked how like brutally honest it was and like addressed the questions that were in my mind. Like, is local food a better option or quality? I liked how it was written and stuff. I found it interesting.
What were you thinking, Jensen, when you read it?
I was thinking from like a food security standpoint, because after that whole month now, that's all I think about, because I was like, people don't have, not everyone has the privilege to drive 20 minutes out of their way to go to a farmer's market on Saturday morning. Some people have to work. they can't afford the $6 watermelon. They can't afford the fruit at all. So like it's not very inclusive.
I definitely thought of like the food security thing on our last one when they showed the map. Like I looked at it and I was like, knowing what I know now, like that's a food security area. Like they have food issues and that's why they don't have, like, not saying that's not what they don't, but like.
Yeah. If there's a food desert there, no wonder there's not a farmer's market there. If there was a farmer's market, they wouldn't be considered a food desert,
And, like, my
right?
mom mentioned stats the other day, and kind of like you were saying, she was like, she said something, I was like, well, actually, this is what's going on. She's like, I wouldn't know, like, but she's more focused on like the healthcare, like, she's a healthcare worker, so she sees it a little differently, I guess.
Yeah.
I have a question. How many of y'all just got free produce because like your neighbor grew a bunch of tomatoes, or like my dad grew like onions and cantaloupe and tomatoes, and like we just gave it away because we had so many. It's like, that's why I asked like, about the operation, like how big does it have to be? Because like we get a lot of free stuff. Like I ate, this is disgusting, 8 onions and like they were apples.
What?
Yeah, I'm not proud.
Maybe a Vidalia onion.
No, onions get rid of lizards, whatever, holes. I was like bound and determined to be able to eat an onion like an apple as a kid. I can't.
Those are different. No, like the ones that like the green onions, like like they look like they've got the bulb attached. This is like so gross. I'm really tattling on myself. Yeah, sorry, I'm stupid today. I told you. I would like go in our sink in the shop and just like literally knock the dirt off of it and just eat it, like really good.
Is it because you saw that off of the movie Holes when they like found those turnips? Or
No, it's because I used to love onions.
That's what I was thinking, because I used to try to find stuff like that, but I never could find it.
Nope, just because I really love onions.
I think like we had like 2 big gardens, like my dad had like a tractor and like would till that up, and like we would have 2 big gardens, but like people down the street would grow different things than what we were growing, so it was kind of like a garden community, but like separated. That way we could all like share, and it was big enough where like you could, if like Leroy down the road called and was like, hey, if you have any tomatoes, like please come take them, like we have too many, like, you know, so I think that's how we were.
So, kind of thinking about kind of the criticisms and support for the reading, I think what it should maybe help us do is hopefully illuminate the idea that when we're arguing for or against local foods, maybe some of our arguments aren't as factual as we want them to be, as far as like when we actually get to the nitty-gritty of looking at the numbers and stuff like that. And to just be more honest in the fact that the local food movement is a lot of times based off of our attitudes, our beliefs, and our culture. And that's okay. There is absolutely, like, sometimes we don't have to have numbers always to back up what we think is best. There's different ways of knowing what we consider to be truth, right? Like sometimes, like, some people want to know based off of numbers. Some people want to know based off experiences. But both are different ways of knowing things. And so it's okay if we're like, this is just another market that exists for people in agriculture and for consumers. And that there's going to be a preference for it for those who, because of their attitudes, beliefs, traditions, cultures, want it. Where it gets dicey is when we then start trying to dive into those more numbers reasons, and the numbers don't quite work out. So like, let's just call it what it is. I think that's kind of one of the things that it should kind of call us to, is to say, let's be mindful how we're using this word locavores. Let's be mindful of extending these arguments into spots where they don't make sense. Like, let's not say we're buying local because it's more nutritious. Hopefully now that's not going to be part of our conversation anymore, right? And then when people do have that conversation with you, you can talk with them about it and say, well, maybe the taste is different. We can't deny it's more fresh. That's a truth. But nutrition isn't. And again, it just helps us have better conversations and more truthful conversations, I think, about it. And so, yeah, I think that's the big piece of it. And I like that as we're talking about local foods, we're identifying the privilege that does exist in that. then not everybody has the privilege to buy local food. So we also have to be mindful to say this isn't something that needs to be pushed as the answer to everything, right? Just like I think all of our answers up to this point, it's a little bit of everything. It's what we need, right, to make stuff work. So I'll ask again, how are portfolios going? Anybody started working on theirs or have questions or concerns about completing the project?
When is it due?
The Thursday before Thanksgiving. So now you've got 2 weeks.
The 19th?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's due in December? I thought that was due in December.
No, so after Thanksgiving, we really don't have anything due other than us just meeting for class, and we'll meet for class virtually.
So can we make that in December?
If you procrastinate now, you'll procrastinate then. I know that's not
No,
a,
you're definitely 100% correct. I'm going to do that.
I'm not sure given Thanksgiving week will make people do
I'll
it
be
more or
honest
not.
though, professors are really piling some stuff on.
Yeah.
Are they?
Like a lot.
Like,
I'm not
almost
saying
done
you,
before
but.
like we leave, I guess, and that's just like, it's stressing me out.
Well,
Okay.
so like I'm supposed to like interview Dr. Klein for like a class and.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'll
Sorry.
be But it's like due before Thanksgiving and it's about professors. And so I'm like, no, it's due, it's like right around when you leave, but like professors are busy, like faculty are busy. And so I'm just very confused at professors. That was the point of that.
We're confusing people, yeah. Let me think on it. Can I give y'all an answer Tuesday?
I don't think any of us are gonna work on it between now and then. So.
Okay.
First of all, you're right.
There's probably like a couple that will, but it's over here.
It's not us.
I just don't want to, because y'all didn't have a fall break, I guess my thinking is like there wasn't a fall break. I hate to give y'all something that you feel like you have to do over Thanksgiving break. That's
something
my,
I can do over
All it's gonna do is.
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I feel like my teachers ignored the whole, Thanksgiving break. I feel like I still have stuff to do, even.
Yeah. Like,
Seriously?
I feel like I'm gonna be eating
I
stuff
feel like
and
I
like.
still have like studying and everything else.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not going home because I have a lot to do and I know I won't
Yeah.
focus whenever I go home to do this.
I'm coming back, I don't have Wi-Fi. No, and I really don't want to have to go sit.
I have 3 things to do that week.
the week of Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
I'm telling, like, when you were
And
concerned about
disrespect.
teaching online, like, all of us were so comfortable because, like, you take into consideration your students and other professors are like, good luck not cheat.
See, I'm like, y'all have the week off. How dare I ask y'all to have something do that? Like, you have the right to
You
that
have
week
the
off.
week off.
Exactly. I don't want to do nothing either. I don't know.
Some of them truly have a family. Like, I think some of them don't really have like kids in the house anymore, so they're like, oh, Thanksgiving, we're gonna show up at our kid's house and call it good. The rest I can sit around, drink wine, and trade papers.
See, I'm the opposite. The ones that have the children, minus you, are the ones that are like, good luck, Godspeed.
You want to talk about being tired? Let me tell you that conversation. Yeah.
Oh, you
No.
stayed up all night typing that paper? Well, guess what? They're screaming babies. Like, get over it.
Yeah.
I
There's
do have a
some of
question
that.
though. So how
Yes.
should we try to go about trying to find someone to interview for it?
You know, so I think that's one of those that it can be a little uncomfortable, but as you start to figure out what the supply chain is, identify a part of it. So who has soda in here? You emailed me about it and you were like, I can't really find a producer or processor, but I can find like the people who, what did you call them? The distributors. I was like, that totally works. And so it might be a cold call or a cold email. Like you find some, and if there's not a direct person on their website to contact, it might just be calling their headquarters and saying, hey, can I talk to somebody? I mean, it's awkward, but I will say it's a good skill to learn. Not to like throw that out there but sometimes you just gotta pick up the phone and awkwardly call. Yeah. And most will reply. And my advice would be, whether you call or email first, give them 2 days and then follow up with the opposite communication. Because a lot of times, if you send an email, they got it, but they're just busy and haven't answered. And then when they get your phone call, they're going to be like, crap, and they're going to email you back. Or if you call and leave a message and then you follow up with an email, they may be more apt to respond to you right there on their cell phone, email. You know what I mean? So don't hesitate to do that either. Most places and people are willing to talk to students about the things they do.
So are
They
we
really
just
are.
doing like local, like here in Oklahoma, or are we doing like?
It depends on what your supply chain is and what you want to do.
Like, I have a Big Mac.
You could talk to somebody here locally. So like McDonald's is interesting. So there's a franchise, like McDonald's are franchised. There's a franchise office here in town.
Really?
It's over by Aspen.
I just, one of my like friends, his dad owns like 3 or 4 of them in California, and he's like working at the one here.
That'd be a good person to talk to, yeah.
I said friend, I really wanted to interview.
I mean, I guess there'd be benefit to local, that it might be easier, but at the same time, like, if all you find is a national thing, call. You know, just kind of go about it. If you really, and that's where I would say that would be the big one that I would try to start on now, because you don't want to be, I really don't want y'all stressing about that the last week of it, so. Regardless of what I say. All right, see y'all Tuesday.